Yes, they just, John was turned off.
All right, well, it's 5 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get going on this workshop. I appreciate everyone showing up to the joint EDAC and City Council workshop. Peter and Chris are traveling, so they might be zooming in, but I don't know if they will be. So we'll just go ahead and get going. I think everyone's pretty familiar with each other in this room, but maybe we'll start off with going around doing introductions real quick, and then we'll pass it off to Shannon, and we'll start the workshop. So Derek Duran, City of Craig Council.
Luke Tucker's City Council.
Jesse Jackson, City Council.
Chris Jones with EDAC. And would it be easier if Luke, Derek, and I sat together with our plaid shirts?
Always hate this. Just like you're mad.
Ashley Dishman, EDAC. Amy Smith, EDAC.
Tom Kleitschnitz, EDAC.
Mac McMurray, EDAC.
Randy Looper, City Council.
Sasha Nelson, EDAC.
Andrea Camp, City Council. Michelle Gottschall, City Council.
PJ Howe, EDAC.
Katie Carmody, I'm the City Clerk.
And I'm Mindy Elliott, I'm the Finance Director.
Melanie Kilpatrick, Admin Support for EDAC and the City.
Shannon Scott, Economic Development Manager for the city.
So I know for a few months now that the EDAC board has been working on the 2025 transition plan, correct?
Yes.
Updating it. And so I think the purpose of today's workshop is to kind of review that, and then also we had our 2-day retreat, strategic planning retreat last week. And I know Melanie sent out Shannon sent out the document. We haven't received the official document, but kind of the summary of it. So I think maybe we can align those two, have conversations on how to move forward. I think that'd be beneficial for everyone in this room. So thanks for coming.
Yeah, so like Derek said, obviously in anticipation of the transition plan expiring at the end of this year, one of the things that the EDAC has been working on the last few months is kind of going through the transition plan and updating the goals and priorities. We've obviously done a lot of work on those goals, and again, just wanted to provide the updates. Obviously, council saw that as part of last week's strategic planning session, so should have a pretty good idea of kind of where we stand on those. But as a result of that, we sat down as a committee, as an EDAC committee, and just said, hey, what can we be working on in the next few months, the next 6 months, the next 8 months? Obviously in anticipation of the transition plan expiring, but at the same time, knowing that the city council is going to be working on a comprehensive plan, hopefully to be completed in 2026. So just knowing there's a lot to be done, we didn't want to waste time, we wanted to get to work and get council's feedback on exactly what we should be working on. Like Derek said, I did send out the action items as a result of the strategic planning sessions that council had last week with department heads. If you don't have that, I've got copies of those with me right here. Council should have also received those, I believe, last Friday when we sent those out. So kind of good timing the way it played out just with this workshop and having the retreat last week. So Chris, I don't know if you want to say anything before we kind of go through those items?
No, I think, EDAC, our vantage point is we're more windshield than rear view mirror, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on what's happened. I think we've all been aware of what's happened, what's not happened. But I think as a community, we have to be staring out the windshield because we've got some big bugs coming at our windshield that we need to deal with. So that's kind of our take.
So I guess everybody has a copy of what was included in the packet as far as updates to the current transition plan, what the EDAC's recommended goals are moving forward. Does anybody need a copy of the action items from the strategic plan from last week so we can kind of compare those? Everybody have those? Okay. So Chris, any ideas how you want to go through these, or?
Yeah, we just hit the highlights. On the front, the tourism. I think the 3 priority areas were the destination marketing, the Paleo Museum, and the outdoor rec. I think 2 out of the 3 have been addressed. I think the Paleo Museum, and this is my opinion, is a function of the dysfunction at CNCC. So I think that's probably why that hasn't developed, but in terms of the outdoor rec, you have the water park, we hope comes online later this year, probably more 2026, but it gives us a great opportunity to promote that, which is another one of the items there is promoting tourism. And so I think, you know, the EDAC website shows a little bit of more Moffett County and the outdoor part of it, but, you know, in marketing outdoor recreation here, we always will refer to the tourism because that's their bailiwick. The next page, new and existing industry. CNC has developed some new programs. You know, I think, and you'll see it on our strategic plan, I think we need a firm commitment from some type of secondary educational source into this community because it would lead to a lot of opportunities. But just as they've started new courses, they've taken some away, they've taken some activities away. So that's why I think we need to find a more stable partner. The solar farm, you know, I think that's a double-edged sword now. We have a solar farm, we have a couple of them, but I don't know if that's what the community envisioned when they talk solar. When you drive across 17 from, you know, from Colorado to Lay, that's a. If you haven't taken that drive, you should. It's pretty intense, I guess, the amount of acres or surface area those fields cover. Coal to products, I think that's one that we haven't developed as much as we probably would like. And I think this is probably the one with the most moving parts because, you know, at one point we're trying to preserve the coal industry, but now we're trying to replace the coal industry. And maybe there'll be some opportunities in the future, who knows, but I think that was the one with the most moving parts. And then aerospace, I think we've made some progress, but I don't think we've had Martin Marietta, I don't think they're opening their doors yet. I could be wrong, but so I think that this page, I think there was just mixed results with the plan. And then infrastructure and planning, you know, we had outdoor recreation. I think the city's done a good job improving, upgrading, expanding the facilities, whether it be at Woodbury, downtown, and I think you know, the river park. Transportation, that's a work in progress right now with the RTA discussions. Housing, I don't think we need to discuss too much about housing. I think everyone knows that it's a topic that, you know, it's on everyone's mind whether there's enough, there's not enough. And then the urban renewal, we have what, 2 businesses that are participating, and hopefully that will lead to more. Broadband, I'm not sure about the last mile, how that's working out in the remote parts. And then just overall public services. I think that's always going to be an area of improvement, and I think it's going to be a greater area of need as we transition from jobs and stuff. I think it just puts a tremendous emotional strain on people and families, and I think that's going to be something we need to keep on the radar moving forward. And a lot of these things, I'm not going to go over the housing projects in place. I think we're all familiar with those. And then the last one, the workforce, attract the location-neutral workforce. It's funny that, you know, attract a new location-neutral. Now the push is to get people back into offices. So it's kind of ironic that we've gone full circle in a quick 5 years. And then retain and retrain affected coal workers. I think we've seen some local success of coal workers that know that they need to transition, and so they've taken the initiative to start a new business, train themselves. But I think we've just seen the tip of the iceberg, and that's where we really need to be prepared to help as much as we can. And there's a lot of resources through the SBDC, the Just Transition, that are trying to help that. But I think we've said we're mission critical for the last 5 years. Well, we are mission critical now. I think just in a lot of aspects of things. And then the last one, quality of life, that wasn't one on the original plan, but that's one that we added going forward because we think that's important just based on the community and what draws people here, what keeps people here, and what keeps the right people here. So that's kind of just a quick overview. I know Shannon put a lot of work on it, so I hope I didn't diminish that with my very quick.
No, that was great. And obviously based on, you know, the progress that we've made underneath those certain priority areas, that's where we went after opportunities and, you know, continuation of projects or things like that. So I think with that said, we can go ahead unless anybody has any additions to make or knows of any items that we might have missed on some of those that they'd like to add. I think we can just jump right into the goals that we have recommended and kind of work through those. Obviously, with some of these, we understand that these are going to be kind of community-led efforts. You know, the city will be a part of it, but we'll just start off with tourism, for example. We know that we have a tourism director. We don't want to step on Tom's feet, but we have recommendations, and obviously Tom being part of the EDAC has been involved in these conversations, but the EDAC wants to do whatever we can to help support that. So there's obviously certain items that we know we're not going to be able to just completely control and take over, but we want to make it a priority to see how we can, you know, be involved and, you know, be best beneficial for the whole process. So I think we'll just start going through the goals unless anybody has any questions or comments before we proceed.
I think if you want to explain how we arrived at these goals, you know, the survey, and then how we prioritized.
Sure. So back in probably January or February, when we were looking over the transition plan, we basically came together as a committee and just put together ideas of areas where we wanted to focus on. And we had probably some of these specific focus areas had 10 or 20 ideas, you know, and some of them were duplicative, some of them were kind of unreasonable. So we sent out a survey to all of the group to basically pick, you know, your top 5 or 10 within each of those focus areas. And then Chris and I sat down and reviewed those and just consolidated those so that they made sense and, you know, eliminated duplications and things like that. So a lot of thought went into this. We had input from, you know, all of the EDAC members, and again, just wanted to make this as concise and precise as possible. So it's been about a 2 or 3 month process that we've been working on this. So.
And I think, Shannon, once we go through the goals, I think if anything aligns from our retreat last week, council can speak up, and I think that would be good as well.
Yeah.
There's a few, for sure, topic areas that I think we're gonna hopefully try and address pretty heavily as well when it comes to infrastructure, quality of life, et cetera, so.
Yep, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So I sat down before this and just kind of highlighted where there's some crossover, so that we can let everybody know kind of what council has decided, what we've already started to prioritize so that we're not duplicating that. Yeah, so good point. So Chris, do you want to go through the goals? You want me to?
I don't know. I'll go unless they don't want to hear from. So we've already hit on tourism. To reiterate what Shannon said, we're not going to lead these initiatives, but we'll help support in any way we can. Tom, is there anything from your?
But just to note for council, I think you're aware that the city could create its own tourism bureau or whatever and do a lodging tax internally if that's what you wanted to do. But I think I would just speak that having a countywide organization makes more sense, that it all can be promoted and there, but politically, you know, the guts could come out of what is Moffett County tourism, and it could be just a great tourism department. But again, I think with you're confined to the city limits, there's a lot of new Airbnb product outside the limits. There's a lot of attractions, and our biggest attraction is public lands that's kind of on the wide landscape. So it simply makes sense to me that you would continue to support a county organization.
Chris and Tom, I might add from that 30,000-foot view that many historical communities are finding this is called place-based economy making, and Appalachia, some of the really impacted legacy coal communities are finding this a very productive place to lean in and to really leverage their assets, their places that, you know, we're not like other places because of the unique environment we have. I know our perception has always been that those aren't good jobs. I think that's also changing quite a bit, and the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable and others are starting to collect data that speaks to that and thinks about tourism in a more of a connected way, that, you know, you might be able to attract people who invest in renovating properties and bringing back derelict and blighted areas, because they can then launch their short-term rental, vacation property or whatever to attract guests, and so that there's more nuance there than we might have always given to tourism and recreation jobs. So I think that I would just ask council, you know, if you want more information on that kind of place-based economy making, that we should really start to think of it in a different new way maybe, and not just, you know, dismiss that those aren't good jobs, because that's really no longer the case.
Any other comments? If not, the new and existing industry topic, that the first two bullet points, I think you could almost combine. And when we talked about that first one, the synergy, I think a good example, and this is not taking a side or making any kind of statement, but AG&C kind of pushed the initiative for this nuclear waste. That was an AG&C that was pushed down to the city of Craig, and it's not received the best response from the community. And so I think that's an absence of synergy there. And that's, you know, we shouldn't have AG&C telling us what we want to develop here economically. We should be working with AG&C about this is what we want here in this community. So I think we put that bullet point in it, and that was kind of right when the rumblings were starting about nuclear waste storage. You know, you saw articles leaked and it was traced back to AG&C, and then next thing you know, we think Moffett County. So it just, as a committee, we just didn't think that synergy represented our interest in the best way. But then that leads to the second point, is what does this community want in terms of businesses in the next 5 to 10 years? You know, do we want to be looking for the emerging industries? Do we want to focus on a certain segment? I think it's important that as a community we determine what type of businesses we want here and go after them. Whether we get them or not, I think it's better than just getting something we don't want, or future generations don't want. And then the last one, that's more of a, I'll say, political statement of the state of Colorado. I think there's been a lot of recent legislation that is not business friendly. And this came up when we were talking about Shannon attending a possible trade show to recruit industries. And, you know, the biggest thing we asked is, okay, what is Shannon going to share about Colorado? We have certain rules that employers have to follow that you don't in neighboring states. You know, the state of Colorado's made it difficult for us to go out and say, move here with your 200 employees because we have this great benefit. Oh, by the way, you're going to pay more on a Family Leave Act, or you're going to pay more here. So that's I don't know if that's something we can do locally, but it's something I think we need to be aware of and voice the issues it's causing when appropriate. Any comments from anyone on that?
It's that old saying, if you stand for everything, or if you stand for nothing, you're open to everything. You know, there are conversations about what next for Craig that are you know, even federal and state level. And my concern is if we don't put some at least guardrails up of what we firmly do not vision for ourselves, we're going to be open to all kinds of things. So one very tangible example that the committee talked about a little bit was data centers, right? Data centers and folks involved in the data center game are looking in every rural community that has any bit of water and any bit of energy. They're looking at us very seriously. And we need to decide whether or not we're going to, you know, be open to that kind of business and look very carefully at the pros and cons and make that determination. If we don't do that pretty quickly, I think we're going to find, you know, there's going to be some outward, downward pressure on us from from data center folks. Case in point, just last week in Denver at the National Association of Development Organizations, NREL was pitching us on, you know, their data center and how these data centers now are rapidly changing as well because of some pressures within communities. So for example, in the past, a community that had a data center probably would have no excess power or water left over and few jobs, but now these data centers are finding pushback in those rural communities or developing their own power plants behind the meter. I mean, some really intriguing and fascinating types of stuff bubbling up there, but not that we have to keep up with everything, but we do need to determine, you know, what are we open to and what are we not, you know, really, where are we not gonna go? And that takes a lot of community engagement as well as, you know, the brains around this table.
The next item were infrastructure and planning. I think the first one, there's a loose partnership with the county right now between the city and county about discussing shared services and things. You know, I think as a committee, we want to see a little more formalized because, you know, tax revenue is gonna start dropping off and services are gonna be impacted. Are we doing all that we can to maximize efficiencies to serve the citizens with that reduction? The RTD and CDOT, I think EDAC wants to be a resource and sounding board. You know, the RTA will lead that charge, but you know, I think infrastructure, the transportation is going to be a big issue, and so we put that on our radar. And then the housing authority, and we just felt like if there's going to be more housing projects, then the housing authority should probably be someone other than just the city council members, because you need to round out the board with people with experience with housing authorities, grant sources, funding, structure, implementation. So if that's something the city wants to continue, I think it should look about the composition of the board and expanding the experience and the knowledge to make it a stronger board.
I would definitely be on the board. I've done housing most of my life. Of course, I have no idea how long I'm going to be here. I know, we did this yesterday. But, I'm curious, how many people are directly in this room are directly affected by the closure of the power plants and the coal mines?
Directly, as in you work there, directly?
As you work there or your spouse works there?
Okay.
So,
3, Melanie.
So my wife's gonna be out of a job in about probably 2 months, 3 months. So it's just, I mean, Tri-State's closing everything down so fast that you can't imagine. It's like, well, they gotta get out of it before something comes down from the Trump administration that says, nope, you gotta keep that open. So it's all just, it's shutting down. It's very frustrating to actually talk about these items when it's not necessary. I mean, none of this is necessary. It's people in Denver that control all this stuff up here. I tried to get my wife to come in here, and she was like, nope, there's no way. She's the controller for Colorado, and was 20 Mile. And it's just amazing. It's like there's no listening to anything. So we're gonna close all this down. You know, like there's an item in here that says coal to other products. So they're gonna spend $125 million burying all the coal in Colorado, and then someone's gonna come back in and take it out and then use it for a different purpose. It's not gonna, it doesn't work. There are other uses for coal. You know, 20 Mile sends a good portion of their coal up to Wyoming to glean the phosphorus off the coal. I don't know how they do that, but to make DeSanto, to make the bugs or the bean spray. And it's amazing. But that's what I have no idea seen the trucks go by all the time. That's what they do. But that coal is like perfectly done and it's washed, it's clean, it's, you know, we have like the best coal in the world sitting here in this valley. It's amazing. And Trappers are basically closing down, Colorado's are closing down. And neither one of them have even gone underground yet. And there's 20 miles, like what, almost 3,000 feet underground? And they've had a good season, so. West Elk is something, they're like 7 miles back from where the entrance to the mine's at. My son-in-law's underground coal mine right there. It takes him 7 miles. He's like, I'm not gonna drive the truck. Go back 7 miles. To me, the fact that we're sitting here talking about this, when, and it's just like, why? And again, I'm sorry, I know everyone's heard this before. There's 300 coal-fired power plants being built around the world right now as we talk. And we're sitting there going, well, we gotta close the good ones. I'm sorry. I sometimes you just gotta go off. You know, as far as going forward, I would say that we need to be careful with how we advertise. You know, there's a lot of good things about Craig. It's just so difficult to get here. I can't even get my friends to come up here, and I did talk to them about the train. They're like, oh, why would I spend $250 to drive or sit in a car for 6 hours, or in a train for 6 hours, and then go and you have to pay for parking, you have to pay for everything. I mean, that's just like a dead end. It's going to be just, you know, like the first 2 weeks is going to be great because everyone's like going to be riding it, but that's like that. You can't like put you can't hang that on. It's like you can't do it.
Well, I think, you know, we're in a rock and a hard spot. We know what we think should be done, but the powers that be are tri-state in the state of Colorado, and they are not gonna listen to us. They haven't listened to us. So now our task is to find, you know, just get the dartboard out and start firing away, because, you know, we just wanna make sure we're aiming at the right targets. And we're gonna miss more than we make, but the ones we make, we want that to be what the future looks like, and I think that's why we have these workshops, is to everyone start throwing darts at the board and not each other, because we need to work together. I grew up here. I'm fourth generation, and there's a lot of people that are going to be impacted by this, so that's why we have these workshops.
Well, and I think too, I know we discussed this in the EDAC meeting, but I mean, regardless of what happens with the mine and with coal, we don't want to be in this position again anyway. So it's to our benefit, I think, as a committee, as a council, as a community, to add some diversification to our base, so that if something comes down in the future, we're not scrambling again to try and figure out what we're doing. So I get what you're saying, PJ, that it can feel really helpless in the face of that to try and do anything, but I think if we don't do anything, that doesn't help either. So.
That's very true.
I certainly think transportation is the key, and I think everybody points out it's tough to get here, but it's for tourism or freight or all of it. Rail is important to me, and I think it will be important to our ag partners, our construction partners, and everyone that's trying to do business here in an economical way. I mean, speaking to people in welding, just getting steel to this community is very expensive, and so we need transportation systems for all of it, and I think that'll be a key of an economic driver to go. So I think we do need to keep pressure on CDOT to have Highway 40 and 13 continue to have lots of improvements. But I think rail's going to be something that'll be a turning point. And I think if if passengers added to it, we might keep rail. Literally, if we don't have enough rail coming in now, and if we lose that line, you know, people have the rails to trails concepts. I don't think that's what we want. I think we want somehow to have BP continue to service this line. So it's important to me, and I think it would be like, I don't know, we've discussed maybe this event center. I don't know where you guys are with the county with that, but I don't envision being able to have a lot of people arrive and use that event center out of the big metropolitan areas. I just know how I've organized lots of conventions and those kinds of things. Transportation is always a big factor, and how you get vendors to fly in, and how you can get people in to do the meetings. You've got to have transportation systems people can rely on. And an event center, to me, year-round transportation. And so I'm on kind of a different tack that I think there'll be a lot of people in this community taking advantage of passenger rail, and I think it's an opportunity for tourism for sure.
So we have on these first two bullet points, steering committee as well as form a committee for the RTA and the CDOT to continue to put pressure on CDOT, which I think we all agree. When you say committee, what do you look, how do you think
How
that looks?
formalized is the partnership between the city and the county to say, okay, in 3 years, we're gonna have this amount of road to plow, but we're gonna have this amount of revenue to plow with.
Right.
How can we share that? Or what are we duplicating now?
Yep.
I guess it's more of the formalization and how.
And right now, it's pretty informal, to be honest with you. We have a joint service, I guess, committee between Luke and I and Tony that discuss really small things, cemetery water, Loudy Simpson, et cetera, but with being in the situation that we are, that might need to be more formal.
That
You know
don't
what
always
I'm saying?
involve department heads from each, you know.
Yep.
So.
And they do, but there's not a formal process, and I don't think there has ever been a formal way. Maybe that's what we bring up and say, look, this is reality. You know, where are we duplicating? Where can we share? And get in more depth into those conversations, which from talking to department heads, they don't want us to do that, but that's what we might have to do. You know
I
what I'm
think
saying?
we're going to have to.
Yep.
And there's examples like Loudy Simpson and like other things like that. I really appreciate the city putting pressure on the county to get that boat ramp open. That's the kind of thing that we really appreciate what you've got and leaned into making that happen. I mean, the attitude at the county sometimes can be, you know, we've got to really conserve, we've got to watch our budget, we can't open these things up. I'm not sure we can maintain them. That's all valid, but we've got to work back and forth, because if Loudy isn't in good shape for a balloon festival or you know, the new couple $100,000 boat ramp, and it's just all the gates closed, we're in trouble. And I think there are some collaborative things that the city and county have really got to step up on. That's a minor example. The other one is the courthouse, the old courthouse property.
Yeah.
I mean, we needed a year ago, and this committee asked a year ago for, you know, what do we have there? What are we selling? What's the incentives? And we didn't get answers. And so I think somehow we're asking you guys as our leaders of the community to go to the county and not let things linger like that.
When we are discussing all of those things that you've brought up, I think another thing is that we have to be aware of what is duplicated. So, I mean, if you guys see opportunities, you know, we need to be aware of them, made aware of them, so we can have those discussions. Because our department heads like Road and Bridge and County Road and Bridge, they work really well together. And so I think we're seeing those things happen sometimes without it being publicized or anything else. So I think it's happening, but also if we see things, then bring them up. I mean, Loudy, the old courthouse property, all things being discussed, and I think hopefully we'll see the fruits of our labors at some point.
Yeah, in the courthouse property, we've got a strategy, and we're waiting for Marketing Alliance on some schematics for how to promote that to developers. But in essence of time, because I want to get to where Shannon, you saw the crossover.
Yep.
I'll just skim through these. The last infrastructure was connecting the water park to the town. I think that's something we'd all like to see, is from recreation, just strolling around. So I think that's on everyone's mind. Workforce, I think the top, CNCC, I mentioned it before, we've got to make sure they're a partner in this community. If not, we got to find someone. We've got too nice a facility up there. We have, I think it's a great opportunity. I mean, who wouldn't want to go to a good school that's next to a ski hill, 40 minutes from a ski hill, where you don't have to worry about the ski pricing. They're college kids. They want cheap beer and cheap pizza. Root beer, cheap root beer and pizza. The other one is the, just make sure we're maximizing whatever the Office of Just Transition. And I think that's someone we need to voice concerns with loud and repeatedly, because I don't know how in touch they truly are with what these communities are going through. And then the last one, with the transition of the workforce, there's a lot of science brains that could help a struggling science program at the high school. If you have workers that are on the cusp of retirement, maybe they want to be a physics teacher, or teach the math, teach their knowledge. It's just something the committee thought, why don't we try to repurpose not only resources but people. And the last, the quality of life, we suggested quarterly events that encourage pride in the community, cleanup day, social awareness, creating videos that talk about our quality of life. That is more visitors and tourism. And then last is create a local committee with stakeholders and all of us to kind of figure out what we want to be as a community. Everyone talks about the drug problem, everyone talks about a lot of things, but no one can sense it. We've got a lot of separate people, and the strength lies not with the fingers but with the fist. So why don't we, get together and really send a message, where everyone's involved, and maybe that increases the community pride and participation. So these are just things that the committee was mulling over, and we threw them on paper, and that's what we have. I'll be quiet the rest of the time.
Well, I wanted to bring it up, the fact quality of life is one where I was pushing it quite a bit. I've lived here, going on, over 4 years, going on 5. Lived in 3 countries and 7 different states, United States, and pretty much traveled the world. Came here to live here because, number one, my wife likes her relatives apparently, so we're going to stay nearby. The other thing that really, I was looking at about 4 different states to move to. Wanted a small town, but I'll be honest with you, the taxes here were fantastic. After sitting in on a few city council meetings, I could see that the direction you were taking was where I wanted to be. Okay, so we purchased a home here and we're real happy to have it, and being used to work with Department of Defense as a contractor, and there's a reason for me to be here as well. Okay, and that is because of all the turmoils out there. I could definitely see where this could still be a spot that might be on the map before it's all over. Okay, and I'm sitting there watching satellites and watching Kim Jong-un pick his nose. Okay, that's where I've been, and that's why I'm here too. So anyway, happy to be here, but the quality of life is what we're looking for. What I see as far as what you're doing for the children, the kids, on a regular basis, that means to me, when I see a man out there throwing the ball with his kids, and not just one property, but 6 properties, that means a lot to me, seeing that family atmosphere. I didn't see it elsewhere, okay? Grew up with that, but it's not there anymore. If you'd say that, could Craig be a Mayberry? Yeah. I think it offers a lot of insight to the people. The education is what do we have to offer? I don't want everybody moving in, I'll be honest with you, but the people that live here, I want to give them whatever we can afford to upgrade their self and their families. So that's where I'm coming from on quality of life.
So I think we'll just run through, like I said, I just wanted to point out some of the items that were discussed at the strategic retreats last week of some of the things and how they, obviously, we're working on them, but we've addressed them. So just going down the priority list, so in the infrastructure and planning section, so Derek mentioned the steering committee, obviously we have the joint services between the county and the city. Another thing that was mentioned, and this kind of touches on a few of the other items as well about, you know, other stakeholders and community partners. So one of our action items was to establish quarterly meetings with other community stakeholders. So that includes the school district, the hospital, CNCC, the fire district, obviously the county and the chamber. So that way we can kind of have that group discussion with all those involved stakeholders on a regular basis. So in addition to the joint services, establishing that and you know, making sure we're all on the same page there. There's also mention of the RTA. Obviously, that is already formed. Randy sits on the steering committee with those other municipalities, so that's moving forward as well. Next item, still under infrastructure and planning. So Chris talked about creating a plan to connect new assets to the Yamhill River, talking about the trails and those items. So we also had an action item from council to improve the trail connectivity, come up with some associated costs in the maintenance, and then obviously incorporate that trail into the master plans for the Parks and Rec master plan. So that's a priority for us as well. Let's see.
And I'd say that trail out to Loudy into the river park, which I agree with, we've been talking about that for 8 years, it seems like, right? And so it is on the TPR list, and I think after last week's meeting, it was kind of the direction of, okay, how serious is CDOT gonna be in letting us do some sort of trail like that? And what do we need, what's the next steps in getting the design, conceptual design, getting a plan to where we actually can implement it and not talk about it for the next 8 years.
And also, with Shane saying, can we figure out ways to make trails without having to involve CDOT at all?
Mm-hmm.
Get with the county, get with the city. Can we do an asphalt trail from Woodbury down to Loudy without involving the state?
Yeah, discuss
Or can
with
we do?
property owners.
Yeah, there's various trails that we talked about that we might be able to do without all the hassle.
I think that's the kind of thing can be a gift for future generations also.
For sure.
Because in my experience with some trail building in the Grand Valley, there's some sections that were the final connectors. 1.5 miles of trail costs $1.5 million because of what you have to do to get through a road or an easement or those kinds of things. Craig is in a situation now that we could build those things and then development happens around them. So you have a business park out there or whatever, and the trail is incorporated into the planning and the thought. And I love this, connecting the community to the riverfront would be absolutely wonderful, but the cost of doing it can get crazy if you wait too much time. And it can literally be a gift to your grandchildren that will be there for future generations that even just is handled now.
Under the quality of life section, again, there's mention of creating the local committee with stakeholders. So I think, again, that kind of reiterates our priority to form, you know, that stakeholder committee that meets quarterly. And not only just address, you know, priorities as far as shared services, but also some of those quality of life aspects and things like that. I think that's all I had actually that kind of the priorities. I did want to mention, you know, one of the things that we talked about too we talk a lot about, you know, misperceptions in the community and wrong information and all of that fun stuff. So one of the priorities was for us to hire a public information officer so we can kind of start staying ahead of those rumors and, you know, the spreading of misinformation. You know, we just get annihilated on social media, and so it's like we, you know, staff, we kind of want to respond, but we don't, but it's hard. So to have that dedicated person that's actually able to go and respond with facts and try to stay ahead of that information is something that we'd like to prioritize as well. So, council, is there anything that I missed that we talked about last week?
I think under the infrastructure focus, that was a pretty good focus for us last week, just discussing, you know, what do we need to do to develop further to the west, actual capacity studies, improvements, because we talk about developing to the west, but when developers come in, we say, well, we don't have the capacity for sewer and water, so we need to get serious about, if that's where we want to move, we need to get the infrastructure out there. We kind of highlighted some of those priority properties that were in the housing assessment plan. How can we possibly get infrastructure to those properties for future development? So infrastructure was big, I think, for the group last week. And I thought, you know, it was discussed that, you know, where can we infill, where can we get infrastructure to a point where a developer says, yeah, it makes sense for me to come spend money here. So, you know, I think we can align with that as well. And then, you know, quality of life is big for me too. Obviously, I have young kids. I grew up here. You know, I want to see quality of life for them, hoping for them to move back. So, you know, trails we've talked about, but you know, under your guys' area goals, it's blank. So what do you see quality? You know, is there anything? I know there's a lot of talk, right? There's event center talks, there's sports complex talks, there's, you know, but quality of life. What do we do to get there or continue that?
So the table's blank because the table was from the 2025 plan, but the 3 bullets here are the forward-looking goals, the things we haven't done yet. And so that would be a good place to start. I think in terms of, you know, and I wouldn't, to Mac's point, I wouldn't want everybody to come rushing into Craig. But I think we're starting to get to our brand. It's a great place to raise a family. It's been staring at us in the face for a long time now, right? It's why some of us return from places far-flung. It's why others, you know, we've been attracting others. Maybe we lean into that and the values around what does quality of life look like for families and for people who enjoy that Mayberry atmosphere. And that's, you know, the signature events and festivals. Do they always have to be that robust? Maybe not. Maybe it's, you know, little block parties and, you know, leaning into these kinds of things that keep this, you know, feeling connected, and where you walk down the street and people still know your name, and you want a face-to-face interaction rather than, you know, a virtual one. You know, you can get that from any community, but here you can actually go down and know the people that you're doing business with still, and those kinds of values. It also will mean that, especially if you get a PIO on board and you start to, you know, shift the conversation from fear and doom and gloom to, you know, hope and positivity and the what's next, that's attractive. And I think, you know, it's really hard for Shannon Scott to be out there, you know, asking companies that we want to come in when we are not all that attractive at times. You know, we're really, if you lean into that social conversation, very toxic and very nasty, and, you know, always at each other's throats, and that's not attractive. But if we reshape and reform that, I think, you know, that quality of life can also be an attractive factor to what's next for us in terms of what we get with jobs and everything else. I like your infrastructure goals in both our bucket and yours, because that's also that balance of community development as well as economic development. I think that's something, historically, we focused on one or the other. And what we're all realizing now is that it's really both. And they have to come together, and we can do, you know, kind of both. That trail infrastructure is both great for us. It's also great, you know, for folks that might come visit us. So I really think that those are amazing goals that you're looking at. The good news from the federal side and yeah, good news. Recent news says that the Infrastructure Act funds are now being released. There are some buckets that are not and maybe revisioned specifically to do with renewable clean energy, et cetera, et cetera. But the basic funds for broadband, water, roads, transportation, rail, et cetera, are going to start flowing. And because of our story of challenge with coal, we're positioned really well to go after and continue to fire up the grant machine. I know how hard that's been. The local infrastructure hub is a resource I'll get back out to staff, but is going through 30 boot camps in the next 2 years. They've pulled down over $3 trillion for communities like ours. They walk side by side, high touch, to help, capture whether it's wastewater plant improvement or getting sewer and horizontal infrastructure out west. There are resources there, so I get aggressive around that one if I were in your shoes.
So Derek, the quality of life, I think the community deserves quality of life. I think kids deserve a place to recreate. Senior citizens deserve a place to recreate all throughout the year. So I think a lot of times we treat quality of life as some enigma that we can't solve, but in reality it just has to be an expectation. We owe it to ourselves to create a quality of life for fourth generation to 4th to 8th generation. And I think that's where it just has to move forward.
I'm going to say from a quality of life standpoint, I was born and raised, well, born here, moved to Snake River, then moved to Wyoming. It makes far more financial sense for me to stay in Cheyenne. I cannot get here often enough. I'm here at least 50% of the time. The things that make me want to live here are Loudy Simpson. I can take my dogs. I'm 5 minutes from out my door to the parking lot, walking. If I'm out of an avocado, I am literally to the store and back in less than 10 minutes. If you live, like in Cheyenne, that's a 30-minute situation. So the thing that we cannot get back wherever we are is time. We live in a community where time is something that is so easy to have more of. From showing a house, for instance, in Cheyenne, I'm 30 minutes almost always to get from my office to wherever I happen to need to go. It blew my mind when I got here. I mean, like 5 minutes. And I mean, it's 10 minutes to get out of town to a rural property. And I don't know how you market that or convey that, but to me, that is something that is, you can't even measure. I mean, the one thing we can't get back is time. And this community, and I'm on the other side, I do want to see it grow. But I want to see it grow because of things like buildings that are run down, and if we get new people in here, we can get our buildings back. And God, the Golden Cabbie to me was just the coolest place, and the Cosgriff. And those are things I think, I don't know that the Golden Cabbie can be renovated or saved, but just like that Alice Pleasant Park, God, it's so pretty. And the downtown street, like I was one of the ones that was like, gosh, I can't believe they're getting rid of the trees. I love it. Now the new sidewalks are fantastic. I mean, what a fabulous thing to do. So I don't know how you convey that, but the quality of life I think we've all kind of hit like over and over and over that. That's the thing I think that will pull people, because that is the most precious thing, really. So I don't know how you convey it, but I think that is one thing that if we can figure out how to market our community like that, well, I think we'll get the people that value quality.
And I think that's a good point. I think, in our marketing that we're pushing out right now, it's more what makes sense for a business, financially, workforce, transportation-wise. And there's bits and pieces of quality of life, but maybe starting to implement more of those assets into the marketing push. So it's kind of a collective, makes sense business-wise, but also for your family and this and that. So I'd like to get with Marketing Alliance and see if they can maybe come up with some
I
ideas
think
on
that
that.
time is just, I've never realized that, but that's a great
Well,
way to
business
look at
moguls
it.
have families too, right? You get somebody who has a giant business that also has kids.
Give your business, your employees time.
Yeah.
Speaking of time, we're 5 minutes to the end. I'd be remiss if we didn't ask the council what they want us to do in the next 8 or 9 months. Real quickly, our top priorities right now, marketing the courthouse site. We're doing focused marketing on people that have visited our website in terms of manufacturers where we're reaching out directly, so we have a target industry marketing. We're working on an IRS letter that, you know, could be one of those throw against the wall, probably doesn't stick, but you gotta throw. I think in the business plan competition, we have more prize money this year, 50,000. So those are kind of the hot action items that we're working on now, and I think we're always looking for, you know, that outlandish thought that someone might just say, and people are like, oh, you're crazy, but guess what? Crazy, you know, that created computers, you know. So, you know, it's something that we're always looking for, and so if you're crazy, come see us.
I think community engagement is going to be important. It sounds like a little bit of that's surfacing, bringing the community along with understanding what's happening. I think we've got some very tense times coming. We've got some people that, you know, speaking of time, I think I know a lot of people in the coal industry, and they work hard, and they work long hours, and they don't get to come to something like this or have been involved with the community, and I think they feel outside of what's happening. And we've got to communicate to them as best we can to reach out and say these are the things that we're doing, and find a way to connect, because I know until it ends, those guys are working crazy hours. They just are trying to hold it together out there, and it's amazing, but I don't know how they have energy to come home and do anything else but collapse and then go back to work. And I think that's the kind of people that suddenly it's going to stop, and then it's like we've got to have the outreach to make sure that we connect with them.
Adrian, did you have?
I think just, you know, we talked about this last week, but just some of those small wins, and I think a focus on maybe that trail to Labby Simpson, but kind of through the city property where we're not waiting on CDOT and, you know, 10 years down the road. But I think just some of those small wins while we're working on some of those bigger things, like the rec center, which we know would be 5 years down the road if we could get that on the ballot and get it passed. So I think just really focusing in on things that the city can do that are kind of small wins that make a big impact, but, you know, maybe don't have a huge cost while people are kind of waiting for some of these other things they're seeing that we're continuing to do smaller things that they're gonna benefit from. So I think just trying to focus on that a little bit.
Shannon, I also wonder, the policies section of the retreat document, the two policies that we talked about, were the commercial and residential development, and then the condemned vacant property ordinance. I think that fits pretty well with bullet point 3 of quality of life.
Okay.
So I didn't know if we wanted to connect those as well.
Sure. So what Michelle's mentioning is, Derek talked about it a little bit. So essentially, when we have a developer come to us, we have nothing to hand them to say, hey, here's what we can offer you incentive-wise, tap fee-wise, whatever. So trying to stay ahead of those and creating policies so that if we do have a developer come to us, whether it's a housing project or commercial development, we have kind of a standard policy that sets forth, you know, what we can offer from the city side. Because right now it's like, oh, we might be able to do this and that, and, you know, projects themselves take long as it is. So if we have that we can kind of put in front of them or promote actively, you know, obviously we're hoping to attract somebody for the industrial park, for the courthouse site. So to have something in place and kind of be ahead of that curve, you know, puts us in a good position. So yes, I certainly think that those are connected. Thank you. Thank you.
Somebody mentioned as well, I think it was you, Chris, maybe about, you know, OJT, what are they doing? Can't bring them here, you'll have to ask them, but the regional group, the Northwest Colorado Development Council, our project manager will be here on the 27th of May of council's meeting. That's your 4th Tuesday of May. If you are meeting that Tuesday, I'd be happy to arrange to have her on the agenda. She can speak to the 26 to 28 projects in the pipeline, the $2.23 billion in capital injection expected if those projects get across the finish line, and all of the things that are being done, and that it's not top down, the community's raising their projects up for the the support that this regional group is offering. And I think that hasn't probably been a connected piece for all of you. You know, Shannon and Peter participate, and Councilman Looper as well, and now on the board of the new Northwest Colorado Innovation Center. But I know your agendas are always very robust and full, and maybe this is a good time to.
Be good to have her on.
Yeah.
For sure.
Like,
Yeah.
Definitely. With more details.
Yeah.
OJT updates?
I'm just surprised that we didn't have a conversation about the casino
Next time.
and the brothel.
Derek, anything from the council?
No, I don't think so. I think everyone, you know, spoke their mind, and I appreciate you guys going through that plan. You know, I think community pride is big. I think celebrating the small wins is big. I think getting in these quarterly meetings together where we're having these groups in the same room discussing the future is big. You know, and that includes you guys, and you know, just hearing your testimony, about why you moved here and why you like it here. I think, you know, I like seeing those those things online too. And maybe that's something that we can do as a city and an EDAC group to actually promote, you know, to promote that quality of life.
Yep.
Because there are great examples. We just kind of look over them from time to time.
And I encourage you to visit our website, because there are a lot of relocate here focused drip campaigns going on right now on Facebook. So if you haven't seen those, what's the Facebook page, Discover Craig, or?
Yep. Melanie's got it pulled up. Cool. Good.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.